Tales of the Legion Project Podcast, the 1985 Legion of Substitute Heroes Special.
It appears we've underestimated the danger of Starfinger.
Of course you did.
We underestimated all of you. I hope we'll see you at the next audition.
Thanks, Lightning Lad. But I think we're gonna pass.
We may not be as powerful as all you, but the five of us together make a pretty good team.
Maybe we could even fill in for you once in a while. You know, if there's something you're too busy to deal with.
So what? You'd be like a legion of substitute heroes? Ooh, I like it.
We'd be honored to work with you again.
Wow, you hear that, guys? Nothing could ruin this moment.
Peter, it's past your nap time!
Except that.
Hey everyone, this is Peter from the Daily Rios.
And I'm Eric from Longbox Review.
And you're listening to a special supplemental podcast to the ongoing Legion Project. And this is going to be called, as we said, Tales of the Legion Project Podcast, because I can't help trying to be too clever.
Peter, how many imprints are we going to end up with by the time we get through the Legion Project?
We could do Secrets of the Legion Project Podcast.
There's so many.
We can do Legion Project Podcast Worlds.
Oh, that's great.
Legion Project Lost.
Who's
5
who?
years later, Legion Project.
Who's who in the Legion Project?
It's endless. So, if you're a regular listener of the Legion Project, you know that we're going issue by issue of the Baxter volume of the Legion of Superheroes from the early 80s through the end of the 80s. And because we're doing those episodes issue by issue, we're trying to match the number of the comic with the number of the episode. And we've already done 12 episodes, which means we've done 12 issues. So because of that format, to try and really look at sort of like an ancillary issue, Eric and I batted around this idea of, well, let's create a supplemental episode, but, you know, let's call it something different. So if we're looking at the Baxter volume in our Legion Project, it kind of only makes sense that the companion episode should be called Tales of the Legion Project, just like they did with both Legion of Superheroes and New Teen Titans, where they slapped on the Tales of. Now, obviously, we won't get into reprints because that'd be silly. Rebroadcasts of old episodes. That would be a year later.
Oh, no, wait. That sounds kind of cool.
Yeah.
Just kidding. Just kidding.
So these are going to be one-off episodes. Whenever you see an episode drop that says Tales of, we're going to let you know right in the title what it is we're looking at. And most of these issues may fall somewhat in chronological order to the Legion Project podcast itself. For instance, the issue that we're doing today, Legion of Substitute Heroes Special, normally fell between issues 11 and 12 of the Legion regular ongoing series, but we decided just to wait, give 1 year of the regular series, and then we threw in the special. So we're not quite far off story-wise, but that may not always be the case. We may go backwards, we may go forwards. The sky's the limit with these tales of episodes on what we can do. Now we have a list of certain ones that we're going to do, and we'll talk about that maybe at the end of the episode. But for now, it's just our way to be able to dip within the larger Legion universe or elsewhere, so that we can, talk about some of these fun one-offs, miniseries, etc.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to some of the possibilities, things that Peter and I have tossed around as potential candidates for this particular imprint. Imprint of an imprint.
Yeah. So it just seemed right. It kind of made sense, instead of calling it Legion Project Podcast 12.1 or, supplemental was used. And then I was like, it's kind of dry. There's got to be something catchier. So, of course, this means now I have to come up with a logo and all that other stuff. But, so that's the silly, fun origin story of this type of episode. But the format will still be the same. We're going to give you the credits, the synopsis, general thoughts, and then we're going to talk about the book and then see where the conversation leads. So, Eric, if you have anything to say, otherwise we can just jump right in.
No, let's do it.
Okay.
So, Legion of Substitute Heroes special, You Can't Keep a Good Villain Down. Credits by Paul Levitz, Keith Giffen are storytellers, Carl Kessel, inker, this time. John Costanza returns as the consistent Legion letterer, along with Carl Gafford as colorist and Karen Berger as editor. Karen gets a lot more play in this in the issue than she normally does, which I thought was kind of cool. I'll get to that. With a cover by Giffen and Kessel. And Peter, according to Mike's Amazing World of Comics, this was released on April 4th, 1985. And in the comic itself, or actually on the cover, it basically says it's an April Fool's issue. I mean, they make a couple references to April Fools, which is appropriate given the content of this book. But I thought it was interesting that apparently the actual on sale date was April 4th.
Which I think that is reflected in the Meanwhile column in the back, where they give you the checklist and it says week of April 4th.
Oh, okay, so,
yeah.
Just so people know, the Legion of Substitute Heroes, we'll get to the more particulars later, but they first appeared in Adventure Comics number 306, which had a cover date of March 1963, so approximately 22 years earlier than this particular issue. They featured the core 5 substitute heroes. That issue: Polar Boy, Chlorophyll Kid, Stone Boy, Fire Lad, and Night Girl. And I have some things to say about Night Girl here in a minute. And they made several appearances throughout the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and a little bit beyond. But that goes beyond the scope of the Legion project right now, anyway. But I'll note that after their appearance in issue 306, they appeared in, quite a few issues then: 311, 13, 15, 19, 22, 31, 37, 42, 51, and 74. And that's all in the Adventure Comics. And there's a bunch of things in, starting with Superboy, number 200. They made some appearance, or somebody made an appearance. And these aren't necessarily major appearances, because a lot of the times these guys are just kind of shown in the background or whatever, or it's maybe one character instead of the whole group. But there's several issues of Superboy. And then the 1980s series, they appear in the Great Darkness Saga, and then issue 300, which has some significance a little bit later, and issue 306, which I thought was interesting as well. So I like how sometimes those numbers reappear with characters, and that doesn't just happen with the Legion. Wolfman and Perez did that with the original Starfire, the Russian Starfire, in the New Teen Titans. It's just that kind of number stuff. I love that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Should I do the synopsis now?
Sure.
Do I really have to? Peter sent me something. I'll get to that at the very end of this. That just made me laugh out loud regarding the synopsis, because I was on Twitter. I was complaining, not really, about having to do the synopsis, because this issue is so wild in what it's trying to do and how it accomplishes it, that it's like I was trying to, I was making a good faith effort to synopsize this thing, and I was having a little bit of a rough time. So, anyway, here we go. Tenzo Kem, the former Legionnaire Matter Eater lad, introduces the Legion of Substitute Heroes to his fellow senators because he has a hunch that something bad is going to happen to his homeworld because of a switch to a computer economy to save Bismol's economic problems. after we are shown that the computers Tinzel is referring to are a room full of old Computo models, Karen Berger warns us not to read this issue. And I thought to myself, why? Why didn't I listen to her? For the love of Rao, why? Something sinister erupts from a star like explosive diarrhea. Meanwhile, the subs prepare to depart for Bismol, with Chlorophyll Kid catching up on Bismol and the team discovering a surprising transition. Color Kid's uniform fits her very well, considering she was formerly a he. Fan favorite, i.e. Peter's favorite, science police officer Gigi Cusimano, is being punished by being assigned as the sub's science police liaison. Back on Bismol, we see Eiffel Ethel and Tusker about to sabotage the new computer system in order to apparently impress the Legion of Supervillains, per Ron Carr. But they soon discover that the fiery expulsion mentioned previously is in fact the return of Pulsar Stargrave. En route to Bismol, the subs try to choose a mission leader, which is funny, while Polar Boy represents, I apologize, Peter, for this, hashtag Comicsgate by tirading against an arbitrary gender switch of an established and beloved character, and then their ship runs out of fuel. Stargrave discovers where he's at and reacts like many of us did when the issue was published. And while Stargrave is distracted talking to Kaluan computers, Matter Eater Lad decides to take a bite out of crime. Polar Boy makes a run for Dick of the Year by berating his comrades when Levitt's Ex Machina intervenes, forcing Giffen to instantly transport the subs and Gigi, without infectious lass, curiously, to various parts of Bismol where hilarity ensues. Tusk grows a pair, stabbing Stargrave with his tusks. Polar Boy then deep freezes Stargrave momentarily, and a plot device finally takes out Stargrave once and for all. The issue ends with an apology from Karen Berger, as is proper. Now, I could have just shortened that very succinctly by Peter's suggestion of saying, in this issue, funny things happen, and I love every page. which, as always, Peter is right.
That was a very clever synopsis. It seems like you're putting on your Keith Giffen, Paul Levitz hat.
I tried.
Yeah, that was great. I tend to mute myself while you're doing that so I can cough and all that, and I was giggling. So,
well, good.
That was good.
So when we first started, or when Peter brought up this idea of doing these Tales episodes and talking about the Legion of Substitute Heroes special, I was hesitant only because I actually my original reaction to this was, what are they doing to the subs? and because I like the subs. I like the whole underdog aspect of it. I like the fact that these guys are, they're trying so hard to be not only just Legionnaires, but that they took this rejection. And if you go back and read Adventure Comics 306, or if you watch, for example, the Legion of Superheroes cartoon that came out several years ago now, there was a Legion or a Substitute Legion episode as well. The Legionnaires, especially, way back when in the comics, they were often portrayed as very cruel to one another, let alone outsiders trying to become part of their group. And despite that, Polar Boy decides, hey, despite the fact that I was told, no, I'm not good enough for the Legion, I'm still going to do my best. They have a very much a can-do attitude, and on a few occasions are shown to be very useful and contributing to the overall good of the galaxy, in ways that the Legion themselves could not do. And then you get this special. I put that in quotes because Giffen's just taken the piss out of these guys, and I remember it just irritated me. But I still have this issue in my collection, and it's not just because I'm a completist or was, And I think I have to have everything or keep everything that I've ever, bought over the years.
Uh-huh.
There is a certain charm to this issue that I will admit that I still, I guess, enjoy.
It won you over. Yay. You big old softy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what, I'm curious, Peter, what was your experience with this special?
Oddly enough, as I was reading it, rereading it, and I haven't read it probably in decades, I was surprised at how little actually happened. Story, what, plot-wise?
Yeah, that's true.
I know that's not the point. But I completely forgot a lot of the different antics. And there are some high points that I remember, but the little finer details I forgot. What I will say, though, is I'm pretty sure this special was my first experience with the subs.
Oh.
To a big degree. So later on in this episode, Eric and I are going to touch on DC Comics Presents issue 59, which is a Legion of Substitute Heroes appearance. And it's also the first time Keith Giffen really got his hands on them. But I didn't read that issue until well after. And even though I might have seen them in the background here and there within the main Legion proper story or series, I knew who they were, but I didn't really have any knowledge. So I guess that's probably why this has always been my substitute heroes, the way they're portrayed here.
Ah.
And then when you go back and read some of that older stuff, which I haven't read much of, but there's a few of their appearances here and there that I read, and you say to yourself, oh, well, yeah, they sort of always are the beaten down, downtrodden characters. So maybe it's a good thing that somebody decided to do something, anything with them, other than just being a reserve team, always in the shadows. Yeah, I don't know if you have any notes on how this special came out, but I think it's really interesting that they decided to take a chance on this, and I'm certainly glad they did, because April 1985, I was 12 years old. This is the perfect book for a 12-year-old.
That's true.
So, yeah, it kind of stuck with me all these years.
Well, there is at the back of this issue, there is a letter from Paul Levitz, But seriously, folks, kind of given some, I guess, background of this. And, Keith Giffen decided he needed a foil for his ambush bug character in the DC Comics Presents issue, and crafted a story around the subs. The issue played the subs as comedy relief. And apparently reader response was incredible. Sales on the issue were particularly good, and mail was much heavier than usual. The story was either outrageous or an outrage, depending on which person you asked. Personally, this writer, who played co-conspirator to Keith in an undefinable role, maybe he was just embarrassed, I'm just speculating there, felt it was perfectly reasonable view of what the subs might be, while in its own way falling totally outside the regular Legion of Superheroes continuity. And with the success of the Sword of the Atom special the previous year, 1984, DC decided to do more one-shot specials of characters from the DC universe who weren't getting regular play anywhere, and picking an April 1st on-sale date simply made everything perfect. So that's the origin of the Legion of Substitute Heroes special. Yeah.
I can expand a little on that. So this is from back issue 65. There's an article, a very short article on the Legion of Subs. This is from Keith Giffen's point of view. And he wrote here, Julius Schwartz, who was the Superman editor pre-Crisis, he wanted Ambush Bug to return because Ambush Bug had recently had his first appearance in issue 52 of DC Comics Presents, along with the Doom Patrol. And they wanted Ambush Bug to return. So as you mentioned, Giffen needed characters. And he wanted characters that he thought were even goofier than Ambush Bug. So he used the subs because he figured no one would really be that mad if he did anything too strange with them. And he said that he lied to Julie about what exactly he was going to do.
Oh, man.
He was really keen on doing a humor aspect to it because, in his words, these are called comic books, not drama books. And he did say, or it's sort of implied, that it was because of the DC Comics Presents issue with the subs that he felt he could put a little more humor into the Legion world as a whole. And then after the special, he says, I was very conscious of the fact that I got away with so much on the special. I was pushing DC's envelope on these characters. I was almost deliberately seeing how much could I get away with in a book using humor and how much DC would tolerate. That was my finger to the wind. I saw that there was something to this tongue-in-cheek, come on gang, we're all in on this joke approach to comics. And I've pretty much been doing it ever since. Which made me stop and think, maybe this special and Keith Giffen's little push of DC Comics with Ambush Bug, this might all be the groundwork for the Bwahaha era of the Justice League. Had he felt that DC wasn't going to play in that sandbox, and if he felt like they were looking over his shoulder too much and he couldn't get away with it, maybe we would have gotten that version of the Justice League. So I can't really pinpoint, this is exactly when Keith Giffen's humor turns, but if what he's saying is true, then it looks like there are certain, doorways that opened, and from there the rest is history.
It's curious, the fact that he, or I can't remember if that was a quote from him that you just said, or if that's just commentary, but that last thing was all direct quote from him. But the part about how we're all in on the joke.
Mm-hmm.
So, two things about that. One, that's part of the charm that I mentioned of this, that I respond positively to, even if I still bristle at the slapstick humor aspects of the characters themselves. But it works. It works very well. But so it makes me wonder then, if they hadn't done that, hey guys, we're just playing around here, right? Kind of attitude that, that quality of this book. I wonder if that would have been, if the issue itself, the special itself, would have been as successful. And I'm thinking probably not. At least for people like me.
Right. He did that with Ambush Bug too.
Mm-hmm.
He would constantly put Julia Schwartz in it as a character, and the character would say, "Come on, guys, get back to the main story," or "I can't believe I allowed this," or it was all like self-deprecating.
That was probably a peace offering on his part to Julius.
Yeah. Or he just did it, and Julius Schwartz was an old man by that time. Maybe he wasn't even reading the books. He was just like, yeah, whatever. And that's something Giffen would continue to do all the way through the Ambush Bug miniseries from the 2000s, and he would poke fun of Dan DiDio during it. So,
but I think the difference there is that Ambush Bug is this kind of an original character that he introduced, right? Whereas these characters are, going back to the 60s. They have an established continuity. They have an established norm about them that he totally turns in the DCCP issue and this special.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's an interesting notion. I mean, you think of Booster Gold and Blue Beetle. For the longest time, they were defined by that Justice League series, even though they both had series prior to that their personalities weren't quite like that at all. And And certainly the subs, if you think of the Great Lakes Avengers and, well, I guess you could go back to like the Inferior Five.
Yes. Oh my God. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. I totally forgot about the Inferior Five. This is that. It's
right.
It's that kind of inversion of expectations and playing around with the tropes of superhero comics. And wow, yeah, that's a great comparison.
I mean, but your point is true. You know, they didn't start out like that. These characters didn't start out like that. Whereas the Great Lakes Avengers, I don't know. I haven't really read their first appearances. I've always assumed that they were a goofier concept, or things like Justice League Antarctica. You know,
I think that was the death knell of that kind of humor in comics.
Yeah. But so I think there's a place, and if we put our brains back to 1985, there wasn't much going on like this with DC at the time. Not full on blast comedy to this degree. There were maybe things here and there, but nothing to this nature. So, and yet it's strangely, as we talked about in the prologue there, about it fits between issues 11 and 12 publishing wise of the regular Legion series. And it actually does connect to, at least the Tales issue, where there's this ongoing battle between Sunboy and Gigi. And in the Baxter issue, what was it, issue 11 or 12, when Sunboy goes to visit Chief Zendik, and he's like, hey, I need you to do me a favor. This is the favor. He wants to get back at Gigi and sends him on this, which, you know, is a total dick move. But so strangely, it still connects, and it's set within the larger Legion universe that we've been reading, which I love.
Yeah, but yet, you know, not. And well, I don't know. It's I guess going forward we'll have to evaluate this to see how much it really does impact. I mean, as you just described, things are impacting this special, right. But coming out of this special, I wonder what's going to happen. And I honestly don't know. Because I cannot remember any issues. Well, there's a large swath of the Baxter run that I haven't read yet. Mm-hmm. So I don't know when they come back and how they're portrayed, because then my next memory of the subs is the 5 years later run. And they are completely different, shown completely different in that run as compared to this special in particular.
Right. Yeah. Well, definitely. I mean, we're already talking about the future, and we haven't dug in yet. But
that's true.
You know, Polar Boy will quickly see his next journey. You know, we'll see that.
Well, that's true.
Yeah. And there are some things here and there. I think for me, it's also thematically is where I think the connections can be made later. So, you know, Matter Eater Lad's presence in this book and the way Keith Giffen handles him, this is absolutely, you can make a direct line to 5 years later with his character.
True.
Yeah, because he has quite a number of issues that are just his issues that are nothing but comedy. So whether Giffen took a liking to him or he feels like that's the kind of character you can do that with, you know, someone named Matter Eater Lad. So, yeah, I think for me it's less about the continuity, more about the this is what we can do.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, well let's talk about the actual issue. What do you have about the cover?
Okay, so I mentioned Night Girl earlier, and Night Girl is conspicuously absent from both this special and the DC Comics story, which I find really curious, or maybe not so curious. But, you know, I guess because Night Girl has this relationship with Cosmic Boy, does that somehow elevate her status outside to be outside or beyond this humoristic take on the subs? Or, I mean, I'm curious what you think about that, because it just seems like a weird Well, weird and not omission that she's not part of this.
I think you're right. Because we have seen her in at least the Tales volume here and there.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe they thought if we bring Night Girl, we have to bring in Cosmic Boy a little bit. So maybe it's best not to use her.
And how sexist is that? If that's the case, then she's defined. Her status is defined by the fact that she has a relationship with Cosmic Boy.
It could also be, and I don't know this because I don't know enough of their continuity. Did she quit the subs at any point? Is that why they moved up Infectious Lass in the DC Comics Presents issue to have a female on the group? I don't know. I don't know the continuity of the subs beyond this issue.
Yeah, and I meant to just so people know. I meant actually didn't mean to look into that, but I ran out of time, and so this discussion about Night Girl that I'm throwing in here was last minute added to my discussion points.
Well, then maybe there's a listener that can fill us in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was my first kind of impression of this cover is like, this issue and just in general is, where's Night Girl? I don't mind that Infectious Lass is here. I think because I hadn't read the DC Comics Presents issue before I read this special. And so this was my first introduction to the fact that not only is Infectious Lass part of the subs now, but so is Porcupine Pete.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and I'll talk more about that later when we get into the DC Comics Presents issue. But that was an interesting addition to the subs from my perspective. Then I like I find it kind of quaint that there's someone's actually taking a photograph of the subs, considering this is the 31st century or 30th century. Forget which century we're in with this. With someone, complete with someone's thumb on the lens, taking the picture. How high comedy or low comedy, I guess, can you get with something like that? And then on top of it, you have this reproduction of a memorandum to Dick Giordano from the sales department of DC Comics, saying, you really expect us to get people to pay for this? That alone sets the tone for this special. You can kind of look at the goofiness of the subs there. I mean, they're not really doing anything. They're just kind of standing there getting their picture taken. But that memorandum tells you, there should be no question that something different is about to ensue when you turn that page.
Yeah, my biggest takeaways, I wrote the warning, which I think is great. It makes me wonder what someone who had absolutely no idea this special was coming, what they thought of when they looked at this on the stand and was like, what? The substitute heroes? And they look differently than we've seen them before. So Polar Boy's in a costume that I'm fairly certain we've never seen before.
Mm-hmm.
Chlorophyll Kid, if you weren't reading Who's Who, you didn't realize that he got an upgrade, both in costume and in appearance. Fire Lad is different, certainly different from the DC Comics Presents issue. I think he looks better. I think they all look better in many ways.
Oh, yeah.
And I love the height differences and the body differences. And, they're not just, if you think of like the subs and you think of the Legionnaires and you go back to like the Silver Age stuff, while it's all just, all fun and great, their costumes could really be interchangeable if you just change the color, or a slight hairstyle. But here, I think they're given some pretty definitive looks, which I like.
Yeah.
So I was really, when I went back and looked at the DC Comics Presents issue after I read this, and they're on the cover of that as well, kind of in the same composition, I was like, look how different they are. Wow. So I really like that he at least cared enough about them to go, you know what, I'm going to give him a little bit of an upgrade here.
Mm-hmm. What do you think of Polar Boy's? You mentioned Polar Boy's costume, that change there, because I think this is the first and only appearance. I'm not sure of that, but considering what happens very soon in the Baxter run that we're going to get to, they change his costume again.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just curious what you think of comparing those costumes. What do you think of that?
I think this one's a little severe. Although what I like about it is it looks like if you touch him, you'll get frostbite.
Mm-hmm.
I do like that.
Yeah.
I like that aspect a lot.
Yeah, but it wouldn't work in the context of the main book when he appears here soon.
Yeah,
maybe.
What's interesting is we're so used to seeing him with headgear, and then in the DC Comics Presents issue, at least we actually see his blonde head. And I have to imagine we might have seen him without a mask in other issues, but if he took off his usual headpiece, what would he have? And it's kind of interesting that they went with like this little frosty look. Whether that's him creating that costume for himself or that look for himself, or it's Keith Giffen extrapolating and saying, look, from the future, he wouldn't just be some blonde, good-looking kid. He probably would be a little, look a little frozen. And again, I don't think any of this carries over outside of the color scheme of his costume.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, Giffen does do a good job here. Like, you mentioned the height differences, the body types, but they look like a little bit of like they're outcasts. If you think about high school and and the cliques and these kind of people would probably be the outcasts in school. And so the way that they're portrayed makes a lot of sense given the approach that they're taking with this particular special.
Yeah.
I do have a question for you though, Peter, given who's in this photograph, who's the bug-eyed alien in between Polar Boy's feet?
I think he has a name, something like oh, now I don't remember. I think I'm confusing it with the animal food commercial that's at the end of the issue. I thought it was something like Glork or Glurk or something. No, that's the
Glork is the food, that you're referring to.
You see him every now and then. You see this little creature. I thought he used to hang around like the Academy.
That's what I was wondering, because I swear I've seen this character before, but I could not place it and I couldn't find any references. So I was just curious. I thought maybe is this the Legion's pet mascot or something? I don't know. It's just an odd addition. I guess mostly just to put something there besides ground in that picture, because most of the other characters' feet are either together or they're totally cut out because of what's at the bottom of the picture.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess Giffen felt that he needed to fill that space with something, and chose that character. I guess I don't know. It's just one of those odd little things that my eye went to.
So how do you want to talk about the book itself?
I don't know.
I like a lot of my notes are just the silliness of the puns or the slapstick nature of it that makes me laugh, or there is a genuine threat in Pulsar Stargrave. Let's talk about Pulsar Stargrave.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is also my first read of the character when I read this way back.
Oh.
And I liked him. I liked him a lot for as little screen time as he gets, and he's entirely punked by the end of the issue. But I love that page of him emerging from the star on page 5. Keith Giffen using those 5 very long vertical panels. It's one image, yet if you read the dialogue, it can be many images. It could be almost sequential, no pun intended. And then when you see him, he's this larger than life character. He may have ties to Kolu. He's referencing some older stories that I've never read. His origins comes into questions. He sounds like he could be a massively powerful character. I think I was just sort of like, oh, he's kind of cool. And then wouldn't show up again, at least for me, until the Legion series after Invasion, where they made a character that was very similar to this called Mr. Star. I think the computer tyrants of Kolu or something like that, they zapped all of their intelligence into a body, and out came this character called Mr. Star that was very similar. Green, had a gem on his forehead, et cetera, et cetera. But do you have notes on Pulsar Stargrave?
So Pulsar Stargrave, and I encountered him once before this special in my Legion collecting before this. But anyway, he appeared in Superboy 223, and then had it was basically a 4-issue story interrupted by this one issue 225, which had nothing to do with the story. I think there was some sort of creator change up that caused that. But 223 through 227 minus 225. But then he appeared in Legion of Superheroes number 273, and that's my first encounter with the character. And I always thought he was interesting, mostly from his look, because I don't know that if you really get to see it here in this issue, but he comes across as it has a very 70s, bell bottoms look.
Right.
I guess he kind of does in this issue, but it's not as apparent as I thought in those previous Superboy and Legion issues. Mm-hmm. He was immensely powerful, taking on several of the more powerful Legionnaires in his appearances. He pretended to be Brainiac 5's father at first, but then he himself revealed that he was the first Brainiac, basically reincarnated in the 30th century. However, his Who's Who entry claims his origin isn't definitively defined. And I did note his resurrection, because I did pull out those issues that I have of his appearances and kind of flip through them just to kind of see what was going on. His resurrection shown here from the Star doesn't match how he last died, which was on Rimbor's moon. So either I'm missing a piece of the puzzle or misread something, but based on what I saw, this doesn't quite match up. So that's curious. I mean, it makes a lot more sense for him to emerge out of the Star, given his abilities. But he also is curious. As you were talking, and I was flipping through the pages, looking at the pages in which he appears. He ends up kind of conscripting Eiffel, Ethel, and Tusker to be his assistants, so to speak. And his first appearances in the Legion comics, he had a couple other people in similar roles. I think one was called, oh boy, I should have wrote this down. I didn't. Quicksand, and I don't remember the other one. He was kind of inconsequential. But anyway, so there's a lot of parallels there, and that's one of the things I wanted to touch on. I don't know if we want to move off of Stargrave just yet, but there's a lot of callbacks in this issue to other things. Do you want me to go to there, or do you want to continue on with Stargrave, and I can come back to this?
No, that's pretty much it. I mean, there's not much that happens with him. He's used as a foil, just like all the other characters.
He's more of a plot device than anything.
Yeah, and I do like the only thing really with him, and we'll probably talk about him later, is the way Matter Eater Lad just goes up against him just makes me laugh.
That's one of the best thing about this issue.
But one more thing. I showed Eric that there is original artwork for that page number 5. And we can put this in our show notes. We have a few pages of original artwork that we found. And apparently on the original artwork on the third panel, they had to tack in, there must have been an error when they spelled prominence. a prominence begins to flare, reaching up, remembering a past life, because you can see the second half of the word either looks like it's an addition pasted over it, or maybe it was too close together or something like that.
Yeah.
So but to know that that's an original page that's out there that somebody bought, that's kind of cool. Because I like that page. It has nothing in it. It's just good comic sequential artwork. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. Let me just briefly. I want since you talked about that a second ago or a few minutes ago. That's what it's divided into 5 panels, 5 really long page, vertical panels, and it is exactly it's this it's a static image of the sun, but in the way that Giffen's doing this, it's also sequential. There's time moving through this to the point where we see the sun on the left, our eye goes across reading the thing, and then out comes Stargrave out of the sun. I love that. That is what comics does so well from a visual standpoint. You almost don't even need the words at the top of these panels.
Right.
You get the idea here. I mean, the text does kind of flower it up a little bit, giving us some meat to or some potential danger to the situation. Mm-hmm. But like I said, you don't even need it. It's just, here's the sun, there's something coming out, and it's probably not a good thing. You get that. You don't need the words. I love this page for that. And the art that you found of this, man, I would love to have gotten that, and I would stick that in a frame and put it on my wall. It's so beautiful.
Yeah. There's a couple other art things that I'll point out, as we go through, that kind of elevated this issue even more for me. But let's go to what you said about callbacks. What did you have?
So besides the thing I said about Stargrave and his assistants, the very first page of this special is basically a recap telling us, how the subs got together. And panels 2, 3, 4, and 6 in here are direct callbacks to the Adventure Comics 306. Which I thought was really cool. They kind of played around with it a little bit. I think the spaceship looks a little different. The one that's carrying Polar Boy to Earth to apply for membership. I love this little change. Polar Boy's walking up to the Legion clubhouse, and he's got this little smile on his face. The very much I'm very confident. I'm happy to be here. I'm looking forward to joining the Legion. And then the very next panel, he's all disappointed. He's carrying a flight belt, which the Legion gave to the rejects, mm-hmm. the people that tried out but didn't make it. That was their consolation prize. I mean, that would be like if we were trying to join, some group and we didn't make it and they gave us a car.
A plane.
Yes, exactly. A plane.
What I love about it, though, is if you're a new Legion reader, you don't know what that is.
Right.
Because by this point they have Legion flight rings, but I love that it's a flight belt that you barely see in panel. I love those first few pages. They're great.
Yeah. I take it back. In panel 5, we actually do see Night Girl. She is here in this one little panel.
Beehive and all.
Yep. And then, like I said, panel 6 is a direct reference to they carved their secret headquarters in a mountain, and there are the 3 entrances where they could go in. They have a bigger one on the right for the rocket ship that they made themselves, so they could go on missions together. I dig that kind of stuff. And then later there's a scene. Maybe we'll talk about it in more detail, but there's a scene where the subs are going to Bismol in their ship, and Chlorophyll Kid, I think, is the one who says, "Hey, we should pick a mission leader," and they use this planetary chance machine, which was first seen in Adventure Comics 319. Of course, again, Giffen kind of takes the piss out of it by having it go out of control and knock one of the other characters to the floor, which was, that was funny.
Come on, because that's such a silly Silver Age thing.
I know.
We're gonna spin this thing. Whoever it hits is the leader, and it would bonk off their heads. Now, it wouldn't go that, they wouldn't hurt them. So for him to extrapolate that into like the silliness of the Legion, I could see why people might be outraged. It's like, don't make fun of the planetary chance machine. But it is kind of silly and funny, and that always makes me laugh when Porcupine Pete gets knocked out. Always makes me laugh.
There might be others. Those are the main ones I just wanted to touch on. There's some other stuff about some of the other characters here, but
right, like Tusker and Ethel Eiffel. I mean, they haven't been seen since 1965.
Right, yeah.
No, that's crazy. It kind of goes back to Levitz and Giffen. You can't make an issue like this poking fun at a concept if you don't really love it yourself. Mm-hmm. Because how else would he know about Tusker and Ethel Eiffel and upgrade them visually and whatever, and you look at them and you go, who the heck are they? And then you go back and you go, yeah, it's not far off from their original appearance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. There's a direct callback to something that Tusker does here in this issue to his first appearance. So, but I'll save that for later.
Okay.
I want to just real quick mention, we talked about Infectious Lass and Porcupine Pete having joined the subs here. I think they first appeared together in the subs in that DC Comics Presents issue, but they're shown prominently here. But I just want to mention Infectious Lass first appeared because they're the new kids on the block for this group. She first appeared, as did Porcupine Pete, in Superboy number 201. We don't see Porcupine Pete until Legion of Superheroes 300 as just a background character, and then he appears in DCCP 59, and then the special. Infectious Lass, however, appeared briefly in Superboy 218, and then she mirrors Porcupine Pete's appearances in issue 300 of Legion, and then 59, and then the special. It's curious that the dialogue in 59, DC Comics Presents 59, suggests that Porcupine Pete joined before her because Infectious Lass mentions having joined the subs recently in that issue. So I thought that was curious. Page 1 again, I just want to mention we have, the tone of this starts off with, is that Prody? Is that supposed to be Prody 2?
Mm-hmm.
Here, as the bard,
right,
singing a song. Let me tell you a tale, a story filled with sometimes I can't read the writing on this old these old news
triumph and tragedy.
Tragedy, yeah. But heroes they finally came to be. Some call their powers weak, yet of cynics I shall not speak. Tell instead of their courage on the day when they came of age. Anyway, and then there's a footnote here. It says, courtesy Interstellar Music Corporation, copyright 2985 AD. that little stuff that they throw in the Legion comics all the time. But what's curious about this, and then going to page 2, someone's actually they want more information about the Legion or the subs. This is Tenzo Kem on Bismol, trying to show his fellow senators, these are the people I'm calling here to help out because I have this hunch. But what's interesting to me, Peter, is that in that panel 1 on page 2, it says, actual data of Legion of Substitute Heroes, ignore popular song, please. Peter, in the 30th century, there is a popular song about the subs. I think that is so cool. Or at least, it's that's supposed to be Tenzel saying that, right? So maybe, I guess maybe I should take that with a grain of salt because, perhaps Tenzel is trying to play up the subs with his fellow senators, or he thinks it's a popular song. Who knows? But that just warmed my heart.
And it's a great way to kick off the issue and yet still put it within story.
Mm-hmm.
It could come off just as like, what the heck? And then you're like, oh, this is a real thing. We're actually seeing a visual entry. I love page 2 because when they do finally get into the more serious PowerPoint presentation of the subs, it's very shades of 5 years later. You see Porcupine Pete, but you don't see his face. You don't see hardly any of their faces.
Mm-hmm.
When they're flying away from the rocket ship headquarters, you just see their feet. I'm fairly certain this is exactly how issue 1 of 5 years later opens, where it's just like a recap of what's been going on so far. And it's like all these little vignettes and all these little, it's like a holovid, I think they call it, or a holo news or something like that. The pacing of it is, I just look at this issue and I go, this is the starting point of so much, and yet it's such a one-off random issue.
Yeah.
And I mean, Matter Eater Lad, like, you don't even know that's Matter Eater Lad. He doesn't have a costume on. He doesn't say he's Matter Eater Lad. Where do they first say his name? Oh, on the page 3, Tenzel Kem. Who's Tenzel Kem? You don't know who Tenzel Kem is if you're not a Legion fan. I love that. I love that they are trusting that people who probably are reading it are going to get everything without spoon feeding them. And if you're new, it'll come out eventually. There is some silliness to it. I mean, even the reveal of the computos. Not that there's just one, there's a bunch of them, and they're huge and they're silly looking. And yet, they're treated like a little bit of a joke,
Well, yeah, exactly. But at the same time, if you are a longtime reader, Computo is something not to be messed with. And right. There are, at least in this picture, there's 5 that you can see for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Or at least, there's 4 at least. I assume the one that... No, there's 5. I see a wheel there. And they're, like you said, they're huge in this room. They're like the old IBM computers of old, where they took up these expansive rooms, and so that this is a potential danger, and you think, oh, we're gonna fight computos in this issue, and the subs are gonna go up against all these computos. What? And then on that page at the bottom, this is the Karen Berger warning that I referenced. If you take the Legion of Substitute Heroes seriously, they're talking to me, or have never heard of April Fool's Day, you are probably better off not reading this comic. Sincerely, Karen Berger.
I'm probably going to go way too deep into this, and this. Were they trying to say something about? Here on page 3, solving our economic problems by switching to a computer economy is dangerous.
Oh, yeah.
How did they get the idea? We get the notion that, by using these computos, it's funny, it tugs on Legion history. Even Tenzel Kem, he's like, you know what? I learned to trust my hunches when I was with the Legion. And I think, not I know and oh my God, it's a computo. I think we're on the verge of disaster. So there's something very, it's all sort of downplayed for comedy. Whereas, if one computer is bad, 5 computers are really bad. That's what we know. But where did they come up with the idea? Like, what was going on in the mid 80s that they were like, yeah, maybe we should poke fun at like computerized economy. I don't know. Is that when the Mac card came out? Is that when, I don't know what that means. Like I said, going a little too deep there, but
that is damn prescient of them to touch on that at that time.
Yeah.
Especially considering where we're at now with things relating to computer economies and social media and entertainment platforms and all that stuff. And on page 3, just real quick, this is one of those little tiny things that happens in this issue that just I find endearing. Tenzil is catching us up on this change to a computer economy. He says no one was fully satisfied with the outcome, but the bill was ingested into law anyway. And I totally dig that. We're getting to know a little bit about Bismalian politics and society just in these little things. It's like, this is a race of people who eat just about everything. Who can eat just about everything. Right. That's so much a part of their society that, of course, they would eat the laws. They would ingest the laws to make it official. That is so cool.
Bismal. I love that it's a play. I mean, I'm assuming it's a play on Pepto-Bismol.
Yeah, it's got to be.
But also that something is abysmal. Like the way that Pulsar Stargrave is like, where am I? I'm sorry. Where I'm on Bismol, It's so abysmal on Bismol. I'm getting caught up on my words.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, on page 6, they do talk about how basically, I mean, the Bismalians developed over time this ability to eat anything except what's on their planet because it's all poisonous. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it is abysmal.
I love, just to talk about Matter Eater Lad, that it's treated like a superpower. I mean, I know it's been that way before, but normally in the past, I just remember seeing him like, oh, let me chew this fence. I'm going to chew an opening in a fence. I'm going to, you're going to attack me with a gun. Well, I'm going to take a bite out of it. Whereas this one, it's almost like he's doing like an acrobatic jump and then biting off Pulsar Stargrave's nose. Or he's chewing his way through the ground, almost like Bugs Bunny, and not going slow, like he's, I'm trying to think of the cartoon, if they ever like elongated his mouth, like, in a funny way. And I can't remember if they did or
yeah,
they did.
I was looking at that last night. Yeah, they do. They give him a huge mouth so he can put in a bomb or something in that episode. Yeah.
See, that to me makes sense. You don't see it here. It's kind of everything is off panel, where if he's going to do something, he's not taking regular size bites of these things. He's able to, he's like the Karate Kid of mastication. Is that what it's called?
Oh my God, that's perfect.
He can use his mouth as a weapon. It's not just these little bites. That's what I loved about this issue, is like with his little turn on it. It's like he's a Legionnaire, right? Like he's like, oh my God, it's Pulsar Stargrave. Okay, what am I got to do? I'm going to take a bite out of his nose. I'm going to go dig underground. He's the one that comes up with a way to defeat Pulsar, It's so cool. It's so cool to take such a lame character and make readers kind of really root for him by the end.
Mm-hmm. Well, and this special, specifically in regards to Matter Eater Lad, this is, my first reaction when, back in 1985 when I read this was, what the hell are they doing? Matter Eater Lad was a bit of a, joke, but he was never really presented in that fashion until here. But then as Giffen and company developed Matter Eater Lad, through the 5-year later run, I grew to really like that portrayal of the character. It was a little bonkers compared to the overall tone of everything else involved with the Legion, but it was it's like watching any your favorite dramatic series on TV or a long running one, and then the writers and actors play around with the format because God, how many times can you do X, Y, or Z in a 7-year series, for example, and not play around with it? And you as the viewer or the reader that, yeah, they're playing around with the tropes and deviating a little bit, but it's fun. And you know that it's going to go back to the usual format, but this one episode or this one comic or this one portrayal or whatever works within that larger context. And you kind of just go, haha, yeah, that's great. But you don't reject it outright because it's built around or it's built within the larger framework, and it totally works.
And I know Giffen is on paper saying things like, look, the Legion has a guy who can eat things. What do you mean these characters are subs? I mean, Polar Boy, of all people, should be on the... Yeah, I remember him saying this even prior to what's going to happen with him, you know. Are they really that silly when you have somebody who bounces? Who bounces?
Well, and they play with that Legion cartoon episode as well.
Yeah.
Specifically. So I thought that was really cool. But I just want to mention too, this brought to mind something, you know, Matter Eater Lad and you know, a lot of these characters come from races where they've developed these abilities. So their whole society has this ability. All of Bismol have the ability to eat things, right? But yet Tenzel is the one, whether he was the first to do it, you can kind of go, okay, I guess that's fine. But I always preferred to think, and they rarely played this up, but I always preferred to think, hey, and you know, Polar Boy's the same way. You know, his people have this ability, and yet I always preferred to think, you know, these particular characters were able to join the Legion because they could do something extra than the rest of their planet. The rest of the people on their planet. And what you just described, you know, his ability to, you know, maybe eat super fast or extend his jaw, you know, that's no different than someone who's double jointed. You know, I'm really simplifying it, but, you know, someone who's double jointed and can do, you know, something that I can't do. Even though I have joints, I have fingers, I just can't bend them like that, right? So that's the kind of thing I love when they play up with that or play up that. And the way you were describing Matter Eater Lad in those scenes, that's exactly what I always thought these Legionnaires who come from societies where they have all the same abilities, they have to have something extra that made them special enough to be able to join the Legion. Yeah, where do we go now?
I just have I'll just go through a list of stuff that these aren't huge talking points.
And that's what I have too. So maybe we'll just overlap some stuff here.
So like on page 6, knowing that Bismol has an overweight calorie agency. Reminded me of, isn't that what Wall-E is about? Kind of, isn't there a plot about in Wall-E? People who are too heavy and they're all on like chairs and all that.
I think so, yeah.
And they like to eat. There's a lot of really cool, like what you were talking about, like touchbacks to Silver Age, page 7, where they're just giving a roll call. They're just standing there and they're like, yes, I'm here. Feels very Silver Agey.
Yes. Yeah. And okay. And then the next page, you know, because the page 7 ends with that panel with the 5 characters that we've already seen leading up to this. And let me go back a couple more panels. Polar Boy says, "Good, but where's Color Kid? I wanted him on this mission too." And you know, that's just one of those conceits of these characters. Like, what can Color Kid do for this mission that Polar Boy needs him there? Right?
Status.
Yeah. And then, but then you turn the page, and then that's the gender swap that we get, showing, you know, the surprise. For whatever reason, Giffen decided to make Color Kid female, and it's really not played up in any way except now he's a she. There's nothing else really to go along with it. Other than the part where the reason he is this way is that Infectious Lass apparently infected him with something that changed his gender, along with a bunch of other passengers later in the story. But I don't know what's the point of this, other than this is just a different slapsticky type of change.
Yeah, I think that's it. And Because he certainly is. He's like, okay, whatever. I mean, he doesn't seem terribly upset. Like he's out of his control.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny at the end where he's like, hey, I'm a guy again. It's like sort of nonchalant.
Well, and it's also not shown, right? It's just a bit of dialogue where he's in some building or something, and or ship or something, and he just makes the announcement. I wonder if it had to do with they felt they needed more females in the story, because we only have Infectious Lass, Eiffel Ethel, but she's, quote unquote a villain of the story. And that's it. And so now we get Color Queen or whatever, and
Gigi,
and Gigi, who also appears on this page.
Right.
Poor Gigi.
Poor Gigi.
So yeah. So I wanted to get your reaction to this. If there's anything beyond what you said earlier, because here's one of your favorite ancillary characters of the Legion being.
Mocked and
that's okay. That's what I want. That's what I was curious about. Do you think that she's being mocked, or she's just, an unhappy recipient of these events? This thing that happens to her.
Yeah, no, I don't think that strongly. I think she's the straight man of the group, right? When you're in comedy, you need
you
need a foil. You need a straight. You need a Jerry Seinfeld when you got all these other nunniks around you.
Yes.
So.
Yes.
I think that's just the role that she plays. Although she doesn't do it often, she just makes.
Yes, that's the problem with.
comments.
Yeah, that's the problem I had with her was that's she is the straight man, but yet she doesn't get much to do in this at all. Of course, nobody really gets much to do in this.
Nobody does.
This is mostly just Giffen doing stuff.
I think it is. I think it's Giffen just saying, "What do I want to do? I want somebody to fall in water, and I want to design a crazy-ass creature like a Looney Tunes cartoon.
Yes.
And just eat him. But the readers know that they're going to be fine. They're going to return. They'll be fine.
I don't know. I like to think, Peter, that this comic was double the length. Instead of 38 pages, it was, 72 or whatever, whatever double. I can't do math. And the Levitz and company's like, you got to cut some of this stuff out, Keith.
Oh, yeah. There's some like deleted scenes somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. We need an artist commentary edition of this.
They're probably too old. They don't even remember why they. Yeah. I mean, the silliness of a spaceship running out of gas. That's stupid. It's silly, but it's fun. And it's or there's some sight gags, or there's some. The Paul Levitz letter on page 23, where he's like, "All right, get them on the thing. And give me some room so I can actually talk about them a little bit." It's so surreal. It's just a surreal mosaic of sketches, little vignettes.
Yeah, yeah. That don't really do anything, accomplish anything to the what is, I guess, considered the main plot. But it's still fun. Hey, it's that you referenced the letter. It's funny. He says, "There's no way I can dialogue a story that isn't going anywhere."
So again, they're commenting. They know.
Which is funny because, the page in which that letter covers up, they're trying to go to Bismol. Oh. It's just funny that they do that. But yeah.
The thing I like about the sequences after is that Levitz gets, okay, so he says here, can you leave me some space so I can give some background info? And all he does is give background info in the very first panel of all their sequences.
Yes.
and they all end the same. Rejected by the Legion, he joined the Substitute Heroes. That's Fire Lad. Stone Boy, after you learn what he does, rejected by the Legion, he joined the Substitute Heroes, and later turned down an offer of Legion membership, won in a contest. But then you keep going. Color Kid, blah, 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 gained his power, blah, blah, blah. Rejected by the Legion, he joined the subs. I mean, there's not much after you get from their powers. Chlorophyll kill. Rejected by the Legion, he joined the subs. Yeah, I think that's funny, where it's like the information that he gives is barely anything.
Mm-hmm.
But yet you do get their powers. I mean, you got, Porcupine Pete. You get to see what he does. You get to see what Polar Boy does. You get to see more or less what Fire Lad does, even though he sets fire to the forest. So it's action, but it's almost like inaction while we're watching it.
Mm-hmm. I noticed, Peter, that you curiously omitted Officer Gigi Cusimano's bit of text. It says here, she was considered a rising star in the Earth detachment of the Science Police, but got into a personal dispute with Sunboy of the Legion. As penance, she has been assigned as temporary liaison officer for the subs.
Right. Same thing.
Yeah.
And what a silly way to show them, and yet clever in its own respect as well. Right, we should probably show what they can do. How do we do that? We'll just have them come up in different situations that don't really mean anything.
Mm-hmm.
Even Stone Boy, which is a visual and a sight gag, the way he did, quote unquote, defeats Pulsar Stargrave, that shows up in the previous DC Comics Presents issue too.
Yes, I was going to point that out. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we could save it for then, but clearly Giffen is he's got a one trick pony joke for Stone Boy.
Well, he is the most useless member of the team.
But he saved the day.
Right, and like you mentioned, he's also the one member of the subs who was invited to join the Legion. So I thought that was that's always been an interesting point about that character, even though I can't stand it. Can't stand him.
Is he really any different from Block? Other than he can.
Well, yeah.
He can't move when he's a star.
Yeah, exactly. That's always been my problem with Stone Boy, is that he just turns to stone and that's it.
Yeah.
Even though I will mention, I did in looking at the Adventure Comics 306, when they do introduce these characters for the first time, and you find out that, again, like Matter Eater Lad or Polar Boy, Stone Boy's planet developed that ability, but it was to the stone effect is suspended animation because of some planetary thing that I forget. But it's funny because they would, in that panel showing this in that particular issue, their faces get all stony, marbly, with cracks and stuff. But they're shown, and I know this is probably just an editorial mistake, but their faces are shown being stone, and yet they're talking. So at least at the very first, they could move maybe a little bit. Even though they were turned to stone, but of course they just kind of ignored that later. But that's comics. These things develop.
Yeah.
On page 9, we get the first appearance of Eiffel, Ethel, and Tusker in this issue. And I wanted to point out, since I'm talking about previous appearances, and this was the first time I'd encountered these characters. I had no idea who they were, where they were from, all that kind of stuff. So when I saw them in this special, it's like, oh, these are new characters. Well, it turns out they're not new. Eiffel Ethel first appeared in one panel in Adventure Comics number 330 in 1965. And so this was her second appearance.
Literally.
Yeah. And as you noted earlier, her appearance has changed quite a bit. She was, her first appearance, she was very much kind of I don't know, what I think of as a 60s young teenage brunette, looking, kind of beautiful. But she had these eyes that orbited her head. They were not actually part of her. They weren't attached to her head. They were just kind of this crown that she had around her head. But here, she looks much older. She's gained some weight, and her eyes are actually part of her head, which I thought was an interesting change. Let's see here. Tusker first appeared in, well, actually the next issue, Adventure Comics 331. He was in it for 3 panels, and this is also his second appearance. He also appears much older than that appearance in Adventure Comics. And while his hair is approximately the same color, he's got this weird, I don't know what they call that. It's not a mohawk because he's got the tufts of hair on the side as well. It's very reminiscent of his first appearance.
And we haven't made mention, or maybe not specifically, of the Legion headquarters, the old original rocket ship headquarters, which we get a pinup of, a blueprint, as it is.
So to speak.
Vent, back, sign, walls. Yeah. And that's the sub's headquarters. And I think in the DC Comics Presents, they're in that rocket ship as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I don't know when they moved from being out of the cave into the rocket ship.
Oh, right. Yeah. I vaguely recall actually reading that story in some reprint that I have in my collection, where I think it was a reward for their work or assistance with some case that Legion had. Or I might be wrong about that. So if anybody actually knows, they should let us know. My note on that Sub-Heroes Clubhouse blueprint, which is the last page of before the letter that I mentioned from Paul, but in the issue. But this is the kind of stuff I gravitate towards, Peter. I love this stuff. So the word blueprint is, of course, in blue. So, visual gags like that, I dig. But no, my note on this Clubhouse thing, like you said, is just, front, walls, sign, things. My thought was, this is the culmination of Giffen's experiment into minimalism. Because his character designs and whatnot, he really simplifies it down to the most essentials and then exaggerates, sometimes for comedic effect, sometimes I think just because he likes to play around with shapes on the page. And this is like this, and boy, you can't get any minimalistic than just having a very basically a cone shape with some fins, a door and a sign, and then a bunch of description boxes with arrows. I mean, that's it. There's not much you can do there with that. So it's a lot of fun. God, Peter, I guess I really like this issue more than I thought I was going to.
I knew you would. Wins you over.
Yeah, it does. It's amazing.
I think part of it too is because it's, as I said, I was 12 years old when I read this, so all that humor sticks with me. But as you read it when you're older and you go, oh, you start to realize there's more adult humor, quote unquote adult humor.
Yeah.
And this is by no means the funniest book I've ever read. And it's certainly not the funniest Keith Giffen, Paul Levitt's book I've ever read, but it's clever and I think it earned its spot in Legion history. Kind of one of the reasons why I wanted to do just a full episode on it and not just like a half episode.
Mm-hmm.
Because, it may mean something down the road. Like you said, I don't know what the future is for all these characters. And the next time we see them, that'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see what kind of connections we can make back to the special.
Yeah. Peter, I only have one more thing I wanted to touch on in the first part of this story.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have some notes on the second part, starting on page 20. Yeah. Oh, no, we need to talk about more specifically, the Tenzo Kim heroic moment scene. But before that, on page 11, this is the first full reveal of Pulsar Stargrave. And to touch back on that whole minimalistic aspect that I mentioned, here you get Pulsar Stargrave, and boy, the color artist here, wow. This was amazing. It's basically just a bunch of black splotches highlighted by the light of the flames that's around Stargrave, right? And so I just dug this picture. This it's basically a splash page of Stargrave appearing, and it's just I love it. I love the play of the light, the washed out colors, where it's really bright. It's really cool. I mean, boy, talk about a big reveal. This is one of those. This is a very typical kind of villain reveal. It's like, hey, I'm here. I'm gonna destroy blah blah blah. And it's just really, really cool. Of course, it's quickly overpowered by what comes next. But in the moment, that one panel is just like really. This is the panel, Peter, that I want the art of. That would be really neat.
You can see Giffen's early Kirby influence.
Yes,
a little bit, in that hand especially. But it also reminds me of when Giffen went full bonkers on the Prophet and Omen story, where his art really took a turn in the Legion of Superheroes volume in the early 80s. It has images of that, that sort of elongation of bodies and anatomy and all that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah, I totally felt like this was him going, I want to play around with this stuff, and you could totally see the connections between this and those stories. So this was probably the first. Yeah, I think so. I actually went through and was looking at the issues. I have a trade of a bunch of Legion. Well, I guess it wasn't the first time. I can't remember the timeline now, but I wanted to see. At what point did he go from I'll just say the more clean line work that he did in the Legion, to the more the slightly not slightly the different style that he developed, and it was around, I don't know. I thought I'd written this down, but I guess I did not. But in the 300s or so, he started doing that, and then you get things like this, and then you get later stuff that he did. So it's just an interesting progression of him developing or playing around with whatever it is that he wants to do. But yeah, you're right. That's a very Kirby-esque picture, and you'll note that he's foreshadowing, perhaps someone's foreshadowing the nose incident, because his nose in this page is all black. You get a sense of a nose, but it's not really there, and that plays up to that later encounter with Matter Eater Lad on page 18. So I don't know. Do you want to jump to that, or is there something else between those pages that we need to talk about?
No, I'm out of my notes for this. Yeah, so you can keep rolling.
Okay. Sorry. Well, you talked about the super heroic jump and bite event that Matter Eater Lad does. Stargrave is conversing with the Computos, and you kind of get the reason why Stargrave has been called forth. Because the Computos say, "Are you not Pulsar Stargrave, great hero of computer wars of Kalu reborn?" And then he's talking to them. I am reborn to conquer. Then conquer here, aid us. Anyway, so he's distracted doing that, and then I love this. Tenzil says, "This means this is my only chance." And now he's in his Matter Eater Lad costume. Time to play Legionnaire again and use my powers. And then you get this great sound effect that is the panel of this page. This just spells out chomp, and you see Tenzil being basically a blur and Pulsar being shoved back a little bit, and then you see that his nose is gone, and Matter Eater Lad is spitting it out and saying, "I sure hope that was worth it." I just dig that. And then the indignation of Stargrave, again, reminiscing or being very similarly constructed in this splash page to when he first appeared. So you go from this kind of regal, very powerful page to this, as I said, indignation, this insult of somebody biting off his nose. That's so great.
So good.
But then we go to, this is on page 20 now.
Mm-hmm.
And curiously, it says part 2. And we have the subtitle, which is Hira Hero. And I didn't mention that in the synopsis because I wasn't sure how to fit that in. And it's, I don't know if it was an oversight that we didn't, the title of the issue, as I said, was You Can't Keep a Good Villain Down. But it doesn't say, this is on page 4 where we get that, but it doesn't say part 1. And yet we get this where the subs finally arrive on Bismol, at least a satellite station in orbit above Bismol. But it's part 2. And I don't know, I just thought that was an odd thing. But it's kind of like, from page 19 to 20, this is kind of like the commercial break, the break of the 4-act television episode, right? And so now things have changed. We're back with the quote unquote heroes of the story, which the subtitle makes sense. I just thought it was a curious omission or change or whatever, and if it was intentional, I'd be really curious as to why they decided to do that beyond what I think is obvious.
Is that a callback to the Legion of Supervillain War? Wasn't one of the titles Weravillain or something?
Yeah, well, that's what was immediately evoked in me. Are they playing on that somehow? But it's such an odd reference, to something that was basically a year ago in time, publication time to this.
Well, especially because Ethel Eiffel and Tusker talk about, this is a test. Ron Carr is going to bring us into the Legion of Supervillains.
That's it. There you go. That's the connection.
She says, are you sure it's not the Legion of Super Substitute Villains? It made me, I had one little thing in my note. I was like, when did this actually take place? But then I was like, no, you can't think like that because the Gigi stuff is current.
Right.
And if you think too hard about where this fits, that just sucks the fun right out of it. But it did make me, that was the only reason why I thought maybe that was a connection.
Okay, now I guess I just have some random stuff throughout the rest of this issue. So, we talked about the memo on page 23, was it? Yeah. So the memo's overlaying this scene so it starts off with Polar Boy saying, maybe we could take one of the lifeboats and then it's cut off. And pretty much we see a bit of Fire Lad's face and the top of Chlorophyll Kid's head, Porcupine Pete's a close-up of his face, Infectious Lass's feet, something with Polar Boy, and then there's an explosion in the final panel behind this memo. And so I was like, what's the explosion? What? I mean, other than they're all suddenly, through the Levitt's Ex Machina on the planet wherever they're at. And then we get that, we get those funny scenes with all the characters, but then we get the planet. So Infectious Lass, curiously, on page 33, is left on the station by herself. And you noted the real quick synopsis for each of the subs.
Mm-hmm.
We don't get that for her. That is an omission. However, we through Color Kid and the commentary of the shuttle occupants, that she infected them with this thing that changes their gender. So I guess through that we get the gist of who Infectious Lass is. So maybe we don't need that. I just thought it was curious. All the other ones get it, but she does not. But then below that is we talked about the subs headquarters, the minimalism of that. We basically get the same thing here. It's Bismol and showing where all the characters are with these little call-outs. So get kind of an overview of everything after we've already seen what's happened with them. With the final note here on that page, the proceeding has been presented as a public service. So more jokes. On the next page, 34, we get this. This is the scene that I referenced before. That is a callback to Tusker's first appearance. So Tusker's ability is he has these tusks on the bottom part of his mouth that stick out, and he's able to elongate them and stab things. And he stabs Pulsar Stargrave. Well, his first appearance, showing his abilities, he does the same thing, only he does it to a tree. And just as in this issue, he can't retract his tusks, which is why he gets rejected from the Legion as a candidate. And then I feel really bad for poor Tusker because Stargrave lets off with some heat, some powers, and blasts them, and his tusks are destroyed.
Dope.
Poor Tusker. He means well. And there's another great Kirby-esque with all this Kirby crackle with Stargrave standing over Polar Boy. The colors of this, it's so awesome. The inking and coloring, where the pages where that is prominent, are so good. It makes me wonder how much of this is Giffen, and as opposed to Kessel and Gafford in this story.
Right. Well, like you said, they've been working with him for so long. They probably know, oh, he kind of kept this artwork open, so he wants us to fill in the gaps.
Let's see here. And I think finally, just a couple of things here. On the final page of no, it's not. The next to the last page of the narrative of the story here, there's a reference to, well, they're celebrating the fact that the subs. So it says Senator Tenzel Kim summoned the subs and Stoneboy to save us from Stargrave, and we get basically an artist's rendition of what happened here, which is that after having been frozen to, what is it, absolute zero by Polar Boy, I think it's what he referenced, and then Stargrave heating up, about ready to blast Polar Boy to atoms. Tenzel shoved Stoneboy off of a ledge and split Stargrave in half. But again, that's a callback in a way to Stoneboy being able to be like the hero of the story, so to speak. He won the contest and was invited to join the Legion, and he turned that down to stay with the subs, right? Here he, quote unquote, saves the day by doing nothing but being stone, by being a statue. And we'll talk about that again here in a bit when we talk about the DC Comics Presents issue. So I just dig that. I mentioned before the Prody 2 Bard earlier. Never call them zeros. And so this final page where, the newscaster is making reference to them and how they saved the planet, so this might be, in one sense, Peter, how I turned around, how I've changed my mind about this issue, because this is really, in a sense, a celebration of the substitute heroes.
Right.
Even though it's making fun, it's poking fun at them, they're a joke. The tone of the story is a bunch of gags in many ways. It's really, these characters are really cool, and this is just one way that they're showing it.
I mean, they have their own special.
Exactly. Oh no, I guess it's the final page 38. That's so Prody 2 comes back and again is singing and reference the never call them heroes or zeros. Sorry, never call them zeros. Oops, Freudian slip. But yeah. So that was nice. A nice way to. That's good storytelling to me. You started with Prody as the bard, and you end with the bard as well. So I thought that was a nice way to do that. However, that's not the end of it. Two more things, Peter, and I'll be done with my monologue here. The very last panel shows Polar Boy walking off by himself, saying maybe the Substitute Heroes wasn't such a good idea after all. And I get why they would do that. But what I immediately thought of was, is this, like I don't know this, is this foreshadowing to what's coming? And then...
I actually wanted to say that I think this is the last time we see this iteration of the subs. I think.
Ah, okay.
I think, because I know in the Baxter run, not to spoil the timeline, but we get a different version of the subs. But I'm not sure. I think one of the reasons why it's kind of fun to do this is because I don't know what happens next. So we'll have to keep tabs on that.
Yeah, exactly. And then I guess perhaps the last thing I'll say about this issue is, so we have this note written in cursive from Karen, supposedly. I mean, she signed it here, but it says, "But seriously, folks, the real Legion comic." See, they totally undercut what they've tried to do with this by saying the real Legion comic is nothing like this. It's just that every now and then I lose control of Keith and Paul, and they get loose. If you think this was strange, you should see what they've done to my office. That is, if I can get them down off the ceiling. But really what I want to point out is she says, "I'm sorry, everyone. Really, I am." And that almost sounds like something Bugs Bunny would say in a cartoon.
Yeah. Good issue.
Yeah. Much better than I recall feeling about it. So you were right. As you are proving to always be, Peter.
No. I just knew the sensibility of the issue would probably win you over in some degree.
Yeah. Well, see, that just
hard copy.
Yeah, that just shows the power of comics, revisiting them all these years later. So I read this in 1985. That was probably the last time I may have thumbed through it once or twice, but I never really sat down and read it from cover to cover after that first time. And now returning to it now, over 30 years later. And, I'm a different person than I was back then. I was in 85. I was a little over. I'm a year or two older than you, Peter? Oh, I think older than that. Anyway, I was in my early teens, I'll just say. And yeah, it's coming back to it is there's so much more to it. I appreciate more of that humor. I've let go of how precious these characters are to me, and can appreciate the playfulness that Giffen and company are employing here. Whereas back then I was a little, like I said, these things they were more precious to me, and continuity mattered, and how dare you portray this character this way? And now I don't care. Just tell me a good story. Show me something different. Show me something fun and enjoyable. And that's what this is.
And I know that's one of Keith Giffen's big things. He doesn't need to know where this needs to exactly fit. He manages to extrapolate the core essence of a lot of characters, and even if he does tweak them and put them into new situations, they come out of it the same. And I feel like he's really good at going, this is why you love these characters. Not because they were in 300 issues, but because of what they can do given the right story around them.
Yeah, so if that is the case, and what you said just a minute ago is true, that we don't really get this group of subs after this point, it's kind of tragic.
So Eric brought up the notion that might be fun to take a look at DC Comics Presents issue 59, cover date of July 1983, because that is the sub's appearance prior to this kind of like a major appearance where they team up with Superman as well as with Giffen's other crazy creation, Ambush Bug. And I did the same thing. I read it after I read the special. I'm sort of glad I did because there are some similar sight gags and some similar approaches to humor. It is incredibly Ambush Bug heavy. An Ambush Bug that is still in his early days because it's only his second appearance. So his powers are a little different than what we get before. His personality is even a little different, and the way he's designed. DC Comics Presents issue 59. We were going to just quick take a look at that. I don't have a lot to say about it. So what, do we need to do a synopsis or anything, or just?
I didn't prepare one, but there's not much.
Yeah.
There's not much to this anyway.
Right. It's just basically Superman is traveling to the future, and Ambush Bug hitches a ride on him by accident, and winds up in the 30th century. Superman's about ready to head to the 40th century, and he can't find any caretaker, so he drops him off with the subs, and basically chaos ensues because of it. And it all sort of works out in the end, but it's another one of those issues where Giffen and company are taking these characters and putting them, a little bit to the left, and playing around with not only the subs, but with Superman himself. And maybe comes across a little too overly harsh at times. He mocks Ambush Bug. He even mocks the subs a little bit. I think my biggest takeaway was that the subs have a sub group.
Yeah.
called the Auxiliary, which I just thought was funny. And who was in that? Like Antenna Boy and Color Kid. He was like part of the Auxiliary, I think, before moving up into the main group. And who was and then the other one was Doubleheader. We get an appearance from Doubleheader. He's funny. I thought that gag was funny where Ambush Bug jumps on one of the heads and covers his eyes and says, you can't see me. And then the other one just looks at him like, hello, I'm right here. But it was the same tone. I was surprised. It was kind of the same tone, the same irreverence, the same slapstick nature, except it was wrapped up in a Superman story.
Yeah, that was my first thought when I read this issue. Again, like you, I read it after I had reread the special. I had this issue in my collection, but it was one of those that I had acquired, I don't know, within the last few years. Because the subs were in it, curiously enough. But I could definitely see, clear origin points for the kind of humor, the takes of these characters that we saw in the sub special with this DC Comics Presents issue. There's a couple visual things that I wanted to mention. I think this is the first appearance of the Substitute Legion logo, which is the old kind of blocky Legion of Superheroes with, you see this on the cover of issue number 59. Chlorophyll Kid has taken a brush with purple paint and crossed out Super and has inserted Substitute underneath it, which, as a professional editor, I appreciate the use of the caret to indicate an inserted word here, and then you get the same exact title logo in the special. I don't know that they used it anywhere else besides these two issues. I'd be curious to find that out. But I like that. I like that kind of stuff, given my job. But I also loved. It's really interesting to see how inkers affect a penciler's work.
Oh yeah,
we see Malstead all the time with Giffen in the Baxter run, Kessel on the special. But here we get Kurt Schaffenberger doing, well, he does the finishes. So Giffen, the credits here I should mention. Giffen did the story and breakdown art. Kurt Schaffenberger did the finishes. So it's very heavily influenced by Schaffenberger's style.
Right.
Levitz did some additional dialogue, as he referenced in the letter in the subspecial. Ben Oda as a letterer, Carl Gafford. So we get that continual, or that continuity of color through Carl Gafford. And boy, I'll just say, I say his name all the time as we go through the credits of these Legion issues that we've been talking about. But boy, he is, I think, one of the unsung heroes of this run, of these characters and these stories, because I have been really enjoying his work in these issues.
Yeah.
So I just want to make a special note in his favor for that. But and this is not really the subs related, but I love the way that Superman looks. There are panels in this issue where it's clear. I clearly see Schaffenberger based on work he did on the Superboy series that I have and some other things. But there are other panels in which Superman appears where he looks very Golden Agey.
Mm-hmm.
You know, especially with the squinted eyes that he has in here. I just dig it. It looks really good. And the way that Peter, I forgot to look this up. Did Schaffenberger work on the previous appearance of Ambush Bug?
Oh,
in DC Comics Presents, but I love the way he's portraying that character in this issue.
Yeah,
it's very good.
I do like the little nod in the first page there, dedicated to the premier Superman artist Joe Shuster. So they were clearly evoking. As you said, there's a lot of panels where you're like, oh, there it is. There's that Superman that I've never read. It looks like, no, Sal Trapani was the inker for the, but Paul Kupperberg was the writer. He was the writer of that DC Comics Presents Doom Patrol, Ambush Bug thing. Yeah.
Wait, was Giffen part of that?
Giffen he was the artist.
Oh, okay. So there was a couple. You said there were a couple things that were repeated in, or well, one is repeated almost directly.
Right, the whole Stoneboy thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So Stoneboy tries to capture Ambush Bug by jumping at him from behind. Of course, Ambush Bug teleports out of the way, and Stoneboy is plummeting to his apparent death. Did he forget he has a flight ring? But he turns himself into stone and then crashes into the floor. And that carries on through the entire issue to the very end, where you have Fire Lad and Chlorophyll Kid trying to figure out how to extract him from the ground. Was there I thought you said there was a couple of those. What was the other thing you were? Or did I mishear you?
I think that was it, actually. I think that notion. I mean, and just just how ineffectual some of how they are. You know,
right.
You know, Chlorophyll Kid zapping that tree, which stops Superman. Porcupine Pete, getting smashed, and all his quills were all over the place because he was in the way of Superman. Oddly enough, I guess Infectious Lass really doesn't do much in this issue either, even though she tries. So, no, I think that was pretty much it. It was just kind of like the randomness of the book and how these characters are guest stars, but they don't really do much.
Yeah. Well, actually, there are a couple things I noticed. And one of these actually is because this morning, well, I guess it was last night, I was looking at clips from the subs episode of the Legion cartoon.
Which I love.
So on page 12 of this issue, Color Kid, he's going after Ambush Bug. Time to teach this man that when you take on one substitute, you take us all on. And he goes, unhand those ears. He's because Ambush Bug is tugging on Antenna Lad's ears, and then uses his color powers, which oddly enough are just these kind of pinkish lines instead of actually being. I think there's a coloring mistake here, but Ambush Bug replies, "Oh no, Technicolor." And of course, it's ineffectual, right? Because that's what Color Kid is. But in the Subs cartoon, he's being attacked by some creature, and it's coming at him, about ready to hit him, and he starts blasting the creature with different colors. He's like, chartreuse should stop you, and it doesn't. Then he's like, taupe, or whatever it is. And of course, it doesn't work. So I thought that was, I sincerely doubt that anyone who worked on that cartoon saw this particular sequence and thought, that'd be fun to play with. But it's just funny how it does tie into it.
I did like the on page 17, I like the callback where Ambush Bug is holding for ransom the cake, or not holding for ransom, but he has a piece of cake in a trophy jar, which is a callback to the old when Superboy leaves Smallville. He bakes this giant cake for everybody, but they all save their pieces as souvenirs. So that's a deep dive Silver Age callback there. That it's like, why is there a piece of cake in a trophy glass? And it's again like Giffen commenting on, look at some of the silly stuff that we treasure in our Silver Age comics.
Yeah, I had no idea. I had no idea what that cake was.
Yeah,
that's awesome. So just like in the special with Eiffel Ethel and Tusker, this issue, you mentioned doubleheader. There's also Antenna Lad. So this was the second appearance of both of those characters, just like Eiffel Ethel and Tusker. So we hadn't seen Antenna Lad since his appearance in Adventure Comics 305. So he actually predates the Subs. And then doubleheader was in Adventure 323. So we get that same kind of thing. So I wonder, Giffen worked on this and thought, hey, I want to do something similar in the special.
I mean, because if you're going to keep pushing the whole notion of, well, which members could be Subs? I mean, Antenna Boy, and doubleheader, that's perfect.
Yeah. And, I talked at more towards the beginning of this episode about, the determination, the grit, the I don't know, the attitude of the Subs, right? And, how they want to help and all that stuff. Boy, how much grit and determination and whatnot do you need to be, the auxiliary Subs?
You need a lot of hope.
Altruism. That's the word I was looking for earlier. Yeah. How much altruism do you need? Wow. But this was enjoyable too. It was really interesting to go back to read this after I read the special and really was taking notes and trying to come up with things to talk about and whatnot. And then I read this, I'm like, oh, yeah, here you see a lot of things already that I encountered here in the special. So
it's definitely a 1-2 punch. I think if people are going to look for the special, they should pick up that DC Comics Presents issue as well.
Do you think they should read that one, the DC Comics Presents issue, first?
Well, I mean, I guess it probably doesn't necessarily matter if you know going in that they're both sort of jokey and they're both campy, because there is a weird continuity to it all, with some of the characters, but just know that they're going to play with the same kind of sight gags and things.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I forgot to mention something you said earlier about the on the cover with the different body types of all the Subs and whatnot. You get on this cover of DC Comics Presents, if you look specifically at Chlorophyll Kid, Polar Boy, and Stone Boy, you look at their bodies, their muscles, the way they're presented. Boy, unless they were if they were colored all the same, and didn't have the defining emblems on their chests, they could be basically clones. So it's interesting that because this is a Giffen is it DiCarlo, Mike DiCarlo cover. Boy, talk about a complete change in style between this issue about a year earlier, I think Levitt said, to what Giffen is doing here on the special cover. That's one of the things I love about comics, that continual quality of change and experimentation.
Much like this episode.
Very true.
Yeah.
Are we subbed out?
I think so.
For now, anyway.
Yeah. One more thing to put on our list of, let's keep watch and see where they go from here, if at all. So for future Tales of the Legion Project episodes, what we're going to do is, if we know we're going to, because we never know when these are going to drop. They could drop because of a certain specific issue in the continuity of the regular podcast that we're doing, or it could just be some other whim, and we could be like, we should read so-and-so or whatever. So what we're going to do is a couple episodes prior to recording another Tales episode, we're going to let you know in the regular podcast. And we'll let you know what that issue is, if it's one issue, if it's a mini-series, because I think we've talked about it a few times. We know that the first Legion Baxter annual is coming, and it's coming pretty shortly. So, I'm fairly certain that'll be the next Tales episode, and we'll let you know where that falls in one of our regular episodes.
Are we gonna do our normal outro?
Oh, I don't think we can do it with this. Too many words.
Thank you.
Do you have anything else you want to, give to the listeners, or are you wrapped up?
I just thought of this, Peter, as you were talking. How cool would it have been? I mean, it wouldn't be that cool because we wouldn't have done it. But how cool would it have been if we had done this special Tales, this first Tales, featuring the subs, if we'd gotten two other people to talk about this issue.
Subs for the hosts.
Anyway, that's all. You can tell me how bad of an idea that is. You can always email me at longboxreview@gmail.com.
And you can email me, peter@thedailyrios.com. And we definitely look forward to more Tales episodes in the future. So.
Oh yeah, this is so just like the subs issue, where it's kind of like this different kind of thing that came along in the Legion publication history that you look forward to, or maybe not, depending on your attitude. But I'm really looking forward to our future Tales issues, just because they'll be a little different, and yeah, it'd be a lot of fun to discover these different things, these different issues, not relating particularly to or necessarily directly to the Baxter run that we're doing for the main podcast.
All right. Then we will see everybody back when we return with Legion Project episode 13. And from there on, we'll keep you up to date with what's going on.
Sounds good.
All right. Talk to you soon, Eric.
You too. Bye, Peter.
All right.